The afternoon sun streamed through Toby's window, painting stripes across the colorful rug. Laughter bounced off the walls as Toby, a whirlwind of energy, zoomed a bright red race car across the makeshift racetrack he'd built with building blocks. Captain Reginald, a sturdy toy soldier with a painted-in mustache and a slightly chipped helmet, stood proudly at the finish line, overseeing the race. Beside him, Barnaby the bear, a fluffy teddy with one button eye dangling, waved a checkered flag made from a napkin. "Vroom, vroom. I'm going to win, Captain," Toby shouted, his eyes sparkling with joy. "A valiant effort, young Toby." Captain Reginald replied, his voice a cheerful squeak courtesy of Toby's enthusiastic impressions. "But remember, a good racer needs strategy as well as speed." Barnaby just giggled, bumping into Captain Reginald with his soft bulk. It was a perfect afternoon, filled with the kind of boisterous fun that only a boy and his toys could create. Toby's room wasn't just a room, it was a kingdom, a spaceship, a jungle, anything Toby's imagination could conjure. But then, Aunt Millie arrived, bearing a brightly wrapped gift. "Happy birthday, Toby," she chirped, handing him a sleek, silver box. Inside, nestled in protective foam, was a tablet. It wasn't just any tablet, it was the latest model, with a crystal-clear screen and a promise of endless games and adventures. Toby's eyes widened. "Wow!" he breathed, instantly captivated. Aunt Millie showed him how to turn it on, and within minutes, Toby was lost in a world of flashing colors and captivating sounds. He tapped, swiped, and zoomed, his fingers dancing across the glass screen. The race car sat abandoned on the rug, Captain Reginald stood motionless at the finish line, and Barnaby slumped against a tower of blocks, his dangling eye seeming to droop even further. Hours melted away. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room. Toby didn't notice. He was battling dragons, building virtual cities, and exploring fantastical lands, all within the glowing rectangle in his hands. He barely registered his mom calling him for dinner. Captain Reginald, watching from the corner of the room, felt a strange ache. It wasn't a physical pain, of course. He was a toy soldier, not made of flesh and blood. But it was a feeling of emptiness. He glanced at Barnaby, who was now fast asleep, nestled amongst the blocks. The other toys, Rosie the ragdoll, Finley the fox, and even Sir Reginald the brave knight, seemed to share the same quiet sadness. They'd always been there for Toby, ready for any adventure, any game. But now, they were being replaced by a silent, glowing screen. Captain Reginald straightened his tiny shoulders. Something didn't feel right. A good soldier always protects his kingdom, and right now their kingdom, Toby's imagination, felt very vulnerable indeed. The last sliver of moonlight vanished as Toby drifted into sleep, the tablet still clutched loosely in his hands, its screen now dark. A hushed stillness descended upon the room, but it wasn't the peaceful quiet of slumber. It was the tense silence before a storm. With a creak and a groan, Captain Reginald swung his legs off the bookshelf, landing with a surprisingly solid thud. His painted eyes gleamed in the darkness. "Operation Reclamation is a go," he announced, his voice a determined whisper. Immediately, the room stirred. Rosie the ragdoll unraveled herself from a pile of clothes, her button eyes blinking. Finley the fox stretched, his plush tail swishing back and forth. Even Sir Reginald, usually stoic, adjusted his cardboard armor. "Right team," Captain Reginald continued, consulting a crumpled drawing of the room, their battle plan. "We need to secure the perimeter. Blankets for barricades, building blocks for reinforcements. Barnaby, you're on blanket duty. Try not to trip." Barnaby, the clumsy teddy bear, lumbered forward, already entangled in a blue fleece blanket. "But Captain," he mumbled, his voice muffled by the fabric, "I always trip. It's a gift and a curse." He promptly tripped over his own feet, sending a small stack of books tumbling. A collective sigh rippled through the toy ranks. "Just focus, Barnaby," Rosie said gently, helping him untangle himself. "Focus is hard when your paws are made of fluff." Barnaby protested, but he eventually managed to drag the blanket towards the doorway, creating a makeshift barrier. The toys worked with a focused energy, a strange blend of determination and sadness fueling their efforts. They carefully stacked building blocks, creating low walls around Toby's bed. Furniture was strategically rearranged. A chair became a watchtower, a small table a command post. "Remember," Captain Reginald instructed, supervising the construction, "this isn't about aggression. It's about reminding Toby, showing him what he's missing." Finley the fox, nimble and quick, scurried around, tying ribbons to the furniture, marking safe zones. It's a little sad, isn't it?" he said quietly, his voice laced with worry. "Building a fortress around him, instead of with him." "It is," Captain Reginald admitted, his voice softening. "But sometimes, you have to show someone what they're losing before they understand its value." He paused, looking around at the transformed room. "It's not a prison, Finley. It's a reminder of the adventures we've shared. The adventures we can share." As the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, the transformation was complete. Toby's room was no longer a bedroom, but a fortress of imagination, built by the toys who felt forgotten, a silent plea for a return to a world of shared adventures. They stood ready, not to attack but to wait, and to hope that Toby would remember. Toby blinked, stretching languidly. Sunlight, fractured by the strange barricades of blankets and building blocks, painted stripes across his face. He sat up, and a gasp escaped his lips. His room wasn't his room. It was a fortress. A colorful, chaotique, utterly impossible fortress. And were his toys giant? Captain Reginald, now standing nearly 3 feet tall, his plastic sword gleaming, stood directly in front of his bed. Rosie the ragdoll towered beside him, her button eyes seeming to bore into Toby's. Finley the fox paced nervously, and even Barnaby the teddy bear, miraculously upright and not tripping, looked imposing. "Wow, what's going on?" Toby stammered, rubbing his eyes. "Am I dreaming?" He pinched himself hard. "Nope. Definitely not a dream. Dreaming, are you?" Captain Reginald's voice, amplified by his size, was surprisingly firm. "This is no dream, Toby. This is a necessary intervention." Before Toby could protest, 2 of the action figures, led by Major Max, a particularly stern commando, gently but firmly took his arms. They weren't rough, but there was a definite sense of purpose. "Hey, what are you doing?" Toby asked, a nervous laugh bubbling in his throat. "Escorting you to the Court of Judgment, sir," Major Max replied, his tiny plastic hand surprisingly strong. "Please cooperate. It will be easier for everyone." They led Toby through the obstacle course of his own room, past towers of building blocks and beneath arches of draped blankets. The toys lined the path, silent and watchful. It felt surreal, like being a character in one of his tablet games, except this was undeniably real. Finally, they arrived at a makeshift courtroom set up near his desk. A small table served as the judge's bench, and Captain Reginald sat perched upon a stack of storybooks, looking every bit the stern magistrate. Beside him, meticulously arranging miniature scrolls, was Rex, the Tyrannosaurus Rex action figure, apparently acting as legal counsel. "Order! Order in the court!" Rex boomed, his plastic jaw clicking shut. He cleared his throat and unfurled a tiny scroll. "The case of Toby versus the Forgotten Friends is now in session." Toby stared, dumbfounded. A court? You're having a court?" Captain Reginald nodded gravely. "Indeed. We have endured weeks of neglect, Toby. Weeks of dust gathering on our plush bodies while your attention is glued to that glowing rectangle. We deserve an explanation." Rosie the ragdoll stepped forward, her voice soft but filled with sadness. "We used to be your partners in adventure, Toby. We built castles, fought dragons, explored jungles. Remember?" Finley the fox added, "We thought we made you happy. But now we just feel replaced." Barnaby, surprisingly, found his voice. "It's not just about playing, Toby," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "It's about being with you, being part of your stories." Toby looked at their faces, at the earnest expressions on their usually cheerful visages. A wave of guilt washed over him. He hadn't even realized how much he'd been ignoring them. He'd been so caught up in the bright lights and instant gratification of the tablet that he'd forgotten the quiet joy of imaginative play. Rex, the Trek's lawyer, cleared his throat again, the sound echoing slightly in the transformed room. Let the testimonies begin. First witness for the prosecution, Captain Reginald. Reginald hopped down from his storybook throne, standing at attention. Your Honor, esteemed members of the jury, Toby, I present Exhibit A, the Great Castle of Cardboardia. He snapped his plastic fingers, and suddenly, a shimmering image appeared in the air. A flashback, seen from Reginald's perspective. Toby, much smaller, was meticulously taping together cardboard boxes, Reginald directing operations with a twig as a pointer. Laughter filled the air as they constructed a magnificent castle, complete with turrets and a drawbridge. We spent an entire afternoon building that castle, Reginald narrated, his voice tinged with nostalgia. We defended it against dragons, your socks, mostly, and rescued princesses, usually Barnaby, who didn't mind the role at all. The flashback faded, leaving Toby staring at the space where the castle had been. He vaguely remembered the sticky tape, the smell of cardboard, the feeling of accomplishment. Next, Rex announced, Rosie the Ragdoll will recount the safari in the living room. Rosie nervously smoothed her floral dress. Another flashback materialized, this time from Rosie's floppy perspective. Toby, armed with a blanket safari hat and a wooden spoon rifle, was leading an expedition across the living room rug, which had become a vast savanna. Rosie, perched on his shoulder, was the intrepid photographer, clicking with a button on her dress. We discovered exotic creatures, Rosie recounted, her voice regaining strength. The fearsome dust bunny, the elusive sofa cushion lion, and the majestic lamp giraffe. Toby chuckled softly, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He remembered pretending to be a brave explorer, the thrill of the hunt, the warmth of Rosie's soft fabric against his cheek. And now, Rex boomed, a somewhat hesitant witness, Beatrice the bunny. A small, plush bunny, Beatrice, trembled, clutching a tiny handkerchief. She peeked at Captain Reginald, who offered a reassuring nod. I have a memory too, she squeaked, her voice barely audible. Reginald stepped forward. Beatrice, dear, take your time. We all want to hear your story. Another flashback unfolded, this one from Beatrice's low-to-the-ground viewpoint. Toby, looking concerned, was carefully bandaging Barnaby's arm, a slightly unraveled seam. Beatrice was positioned as the nurse, offering comforting words. Barnaby. He was captured by the evil vacuum monster. Beatrice explained, her voice gaining confidence. He was very brave, but he needed rescuing. Toby fixed him right up, and we all had a tea party to celebrate. Toby's heart ached. He remembered Barnaby's injury. A silly accident during a particularly boisterous game. He remembered the seriousness with which he'd applied the bandage, the care he'd taken to make Barnaby feel better. It was a small moment, easily forgotten, but now, seeing it through Beatrice's eyes, it felt incredibly significant. He looked at the toys, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and sadness. They weren't angry, not really. They were just hurt. And as each memory flickered to life, a part of him seemed to awaken as well. The colors of his childhood, once vibrant, had faded to gray in his obsession with the tablet. Now they were slowly, tentatively, beginning to return. Toby slumped onto a beanbag chair, the weight of the toy's memories pressing down on him. He wanted to recall every detail, to reassure them he hadn't forgotten, but the images felt distant, hazy. Like looking at old photographs, he knew that was him, that was fun, but the feeling, the vibrancy was gone. I remember building a castle, he stammered, but it's all blurry. And the safari. I think we had a safari? He rubbed his forehead, frustration building. It's like trying to catch smoke. Captain Reginald frowned, his plastic face unreadable. Blurry? Smoke? But it was real, Toby. We spent hours. We laughed, we created, we lived within those adventures. I know. Toby's voice rose in desperation. It's just, lately everything's been on this screen. He held up his tablet, a sheepish look on his face. It's different. There are so many games, so many things to do. It's all right here. Rex the Trex lawyer scoffed. A screen? What adventures can a flat, glowing rectangle offer? No dust, no scrapes, no shared laughter. It sounds sterile. It's not sterile. Toby protested, but even he didn't sound convinced. It's exciting. You can be anyone, go anywhere. You can fly spaceships and fight dragons and, he trailed off, noticing the blank stares of his toys. They didn't understand. How could they? They were made of plastic and plush, of wood and cardboard. They didn't grasp the allure of virtual worlds. A soft hoot interrupted the silence. Professor Sophocles, a wise old owl with spectacles perched on his beak, glided down from a bookshelf. Perhaps, young Toby, he said in a gentle voice, the excitement lies not in where you go, but in how you get there. The tablet provides the destination, yes, but it does not build the road. Toby looked at the owl, confused. What do you mean? Imagination, my boy, is the road. It is the engine that powers adventure. The tablet shows you a dragon, but you imagined the castle it terrorized. You decided who the hero would be. The tablet provides the picture, but you provided the story. He looked around at his toys, at Captain Reginald's determined gaze, Rosie's hopeful smile, even Beatrice's shy peek. They hadn't needed a screen to be brave, to be explorers, to be heroes. They had simply needed him. A wave of guilt washed over Toby, heavy and undeniable. He had been so caught up in the doing of the tablet games, he'd forgotten the joy of creating his own adventures. I think I understand, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I let the tablet do the imagining for me. I stopped using my own. He paused, searching for the right word. My own magic. A single tear rolled down Beatrice's plush cheek. Captain Reginald, though stoic, lowered his head slightly. Toby realized then, with a pang of sadness, that he hadn't just forgotten adventures, he had forgotten how to play. And in doing so, he had hurt his dearest friends. Captain Reginald cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the transformed room. Very well, Toby, he announced, his voice firm but not unkind. We have heard your remorse. We understand your fascination with the glowing rectangle. He gestured dismissively towards the tablet lying abandoned on the floor. But understanding is not enough. We must see proof that the spark, the imagination, still flickers within you. Toby's heart pounded. Proof? What kind of proof? Reginald snapped his plastic fingers, and Barnaby, the clumsy teddy bear, lumbered forward, pushing a large cardboard box. It was a plain, brown box, the kind that once held a refrigerator. Your test, Reginald declared, is this. You must create an adventure. Using only this box and your own mind, you must show us you can still build a world. Toby stared at the box, dumbfounded. A cardboard box? After spaceships and dragons and laser battles? It seemed pathetic. Just a box. Just a box, Reginald confirmed, crossing his arms. It is a blank canvas, a universe waiting to be born. But it requires a creator. Toby hesitantly circled the box. He poked it, then kicked it lightly. His mind, still wired for the instant gratification of the tablet, felt strangely blank. He tried to think of a game, something he'd played on the screen. Okay, he muttered, it could be a level. Like, you have to jump over obstacles and collect points. He began to draw squares on the box with his finger, trying to map out a digital-style game board. Rosie, the ragdoll, tilted her head, her button eyes filled with concern. Is that fun, Toby? It's strategic, he mumbled, erasing one of the squares. You have to plan your moves. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't working. It felt forced, lifeless. It wasn't an adventure, it was just a pale imitation of one. Barnaby, attempting to be helpful, tried to climb inside the box, getting stuck with his head poking out of the top. I'm a fortress, he announced, muffled. Protecting the kingdom. Toby couldn't help but chuckle, but the laughter felt hollow. Barnaby's clumsy attempt only highlighted his own creative block. It needs rules, Toby continued, trying to force himself to engage.
And power-ups.
And a boss level. He was listing features, not imagining a story. He pictured the tablet screen, the flashing lights, the pre-programmed challenges. He was trying to recreate a game, not create a world. Professor Sophocles hooted softly from his perch. Perhaps, young Toby, you are looking for the game within the box, when the true game is the act of creation itself. Toby sighed, running a hand through his hair. It was no use. He was stuck. He glanced at Captain Reginald, who remained impassive, his plastic gaze unwavering. He felt a wave of frustration, and a deeper pang of disappointment, not in Reginald but in himself. He had forgotten how to just play. Professor Sophocles' words hung in the air, a gentle echo in Toby's frustrated silence. He stared at the cardboard box, really looked at it for the first time. It wasn't a screen waiting to be filled, a game to be programmed. It was empty. And in that emptiness, a tiny spark began to flicker. He remembered building forts with blankets and pillows, transforming his living room into a jungle, a pirate ship, a faraway planet. He hadn't needed instructions then, hadn't needed preset levels or power-ups. He'd just been there. Slowly, he reached for a crayon lying near the box. Instead of drawing squares, he began to sketch a large, circular window. "Okay," he murmured, his voice gaining a touch of excitement. "This isn't a level. It's a spaceship. The Star Wanderer." Captain Reginald's rigid posture relaxed slightly. Rosie's button eyes widened with anticipation. Even Professor Sophocles' gaze seemed a little brighter. Toby began to narrate as he played, his voice gaining confidence with each sentence. "The Star Wanderer is on a mission to planet Globna, a world made entirely of jelly. But beware. The Globnarians are mischievous creatures who love to bounce unsuspecting spaceships into the jelly sea." He grabbed a small plastic dinosaur, using it as his co-pilot. "Captain Rex, prepare for hyperspace jump." Barnaby, still half stuck in the box, flailed his arms wildly, accidentally knocking over a tower of building blocks. The blocks tumbled down, landing around the box like debris. "Whoa! Asteroid field!" Toby exclaimed, instantly incorporating the accident into his story. "Captain Rex, evasive maneuvers. We're heading into an asteroid field." He began to steer the spaceship, the cardboard box, around the scattered blocks, making engine noises. A genuine smile spread across Toby's face. He was no longer trying to recreate something. He was creating something new, something entirely his own. He imagined the shimmering jelly landscape of planet Globna, the bouncy Globnarians, and the daring rescue mission he and Captain Rex were about to undertake. "And now," Toby announced, grabbing a red blanket and draping it over the box, "we activate the jelly shields. They'll protect us from the Globnarian bounce rays." Rosie giggled, a soft, sweet sound. Captain Reginald allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to play on his plastic lips. Professor Sophocles hooted with approval. As Toby continued his adventure, his voice filled with enthusiasm, the toys watched, their faces alight with joy. They weren't just observing a game, they were witnessing the rebirth of a friend's imagination. The cardboard box wasn't just a box anymore. It was a spaceship, a castle, a world of endless possibilities, all brought to life by the power of a boy who had remembered how to play. The last of the jelly shields crumbled as Toby landed the Star Wanderer safely back on Earth, his bedroom floor. He collapsed back onto his knees, breathless with laughter, his cheeks flushed with excitement. The room, which just moments before had been a fantastical spaceship bridge, began to shimmer and dissolve. The blankets slid off the box, the building blocks righted themselves, and the furniture rearranged itself back to its original positions. Captain Reginald, standing tall and proud, cleared his throat. "Ahem. The Court of Forgotten Friends finds the defendant, Toby, fully rehabilitated. His imagination is restored." A cheer erupted from the toys. Rosie clapped her paws, Barnaby did a wobbly somersault, and even Professor Sophocles let out a celebratory hoot. Toby grinned, feeling a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the imaginary Globner sun. I had completely forgotten how much fun that was, he admitted, looking at the cardboard box with newfound respect. It's way better than any game on my tablet. Indeed, Captain Reginald said, his voice softening. The true adventures are the ones we create ourselves. He paused then, with a surprisingly gentle gesture, reached into his tiny uniform pocket. He produced a small, polished button, gleaming in the soft light. A token, he explained, offering it to Toby.
A reminder.
A reminder that even the simplest things can become extraordinary with a little imagination. And a reminder of our rebellion. He gave a small, almost shy smile. Toby carefully took the button, holding it tight in his palm.
I won't forget, he promised. I promise to play with you guys more.
And maybe we can even use the tablet sometimes with you. We could make a movie about the Star Wanderer, with Captain Rex as the hero. Rosie squealed with delight.
Oh yes.
And I can be the princess of Planet Globner. Barnaby, still slightly disheveled, added, and I can be the asteroid. Toby laughed, gathering his toys into a hug. He realized that the tablet wasn't the enemy. It was about balance. It was about remembering that real friendship, real adventure, and real joy came from connecting with the world, and with the friends around him. As he hugged them close, Toby felt a surge of gratitude. He had been given a wonderful gift. Not just a tablet, but a group of friends who had bravely reminded him of the magic within himself. And he knew, as he looked at their smiling faces, that their adventures were far from over.